Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast with Benji Naesen, presented by Zwift, the online cycling platform that makes training fun. Here for UAE Tour Stage 5, another sprint from Ras Al Khaimah Corniche to Al Marjan Island, 182 Ks long, and we've seen this sprint before last year, regularly in UAE Tour. There was some echelon action potential, there's some intermediate sprint points, but likely to be a sprint. Cavendish crashed heavily yesterday. We were thinking, will he go for the sprint? He did start, but yeah, he did crash heavily. So the question was, how would he go? Would Bike Exchange get the lead out right for Groeneweg? And would Philipsen go well again? Olav Kooij, Sam Bennett, and his new Bora train, how would they go? But you're on echelon watch again, Benji, early in this stage. And apparently, according to you, small groups went away.
Yeah, I saw a bit of an echelon action at the start of the stage. I don't actually know who initiated it, that one, but we did notice that two riders were behind, and that was Ganna and Yates, two important riders that were pretty high up in GC. Ganna basically closed that down 90% him. The entire gap was like 15 seconds on the group ahead, and they were riding ahead, so pretty proper work. Pogačar working a lot in the echelons as well, in the front echelon of goals, because he saw that Yates was behind most likely. After that, it came close together again pretty soon after, so nothing too crazy. It started being a resty stage once again, pretty relaxed, nothing happening. And in the last 35 kilometers, once again, echelons seem to be occurring for like 5 to 4 kilometers, but nothing too crazy. The group just split in two and then came back together in the span of 2 minutes. So nothing too outrageous and nothing happened too much. But then we came to that point towards the end of the stage where you've got this curved road to the right, and then you've got a roundabout, 2.9k to go, and it turns back. And we started that curve to the right, and we saw someone having a puncture at the back of the peloton.
Well, it was Kirkler went free first. There was
Yeah,
a
you're right.
lone breakaway, the Czech national champion, and there was a bit of the peloton not really doing anything. And he had 1 minute 30 into the last 8 kilometers of the sprint stage. The Gazprom rider, I'm like, surely he can't win this. Alpecin didn't want to chase. But then he got kind of ruined because Pogačar punctured, the man who's had good luck for a long time. We saw George Bennett move to the front with like 7Ks to go and put the brakes on, and then Kirkler got a bit of a bigger gap, and we saw Pogačar sliding out the back. Quick, well, not actually that quick a bike change, but he had Mikkel Bjerg with him in the cars. But this was the last 6Ks. He's trying to come back, and the lead out, he got a bit lucky, Benji, I think. No quick step lead out, no real Bike Exchange lighting it up at that point. He really just had Movistar on the front, so he was able to come back. Ineos didn't pace. Would you have paced if you were Ineos?
I probably wouldn't have. It would have been a bit lame to win the UAE Tour based on Pogačar puncturing in the last 5 kilometers. Then again, when I'm in action, I might not have a heart to not pace, so we don't know that yet. But I probably wouldn't have. Would you have?
Probably not. Because if it was the Tour de France, 100% yes, of course. I would have paced. And I would have, told Ganna to go to the front and rip it with Flamme. But it's the UAE Tour. Pogačar's on UAE. We've got her feet coming up.
Also,
yeah,
considering it is the UAE Tour, if you do it to him now, what if you have a puncture with 6K to go in the Tour, and they're like, we wouldn't have paced normally, but because he did it to us in the UAE Tour, we'll do it to him.
No, exactly. You set yourself up for retaliation in a race that is more important for Ineos, the Tour de France. But he got back with about 5Ks through the convoy before the sprint trains really started to light it up with 4Ks to go. FDJ coming through on the right-hand side for Demar early. And it's the same thing each day, Benji. The two long trains of FDJ and Bike Exchange go to the front of the race with 4Ks to go, and then they're nowhere to be seen with 1K to go. What are you seeing from them? Are you seeing like old school sprint tactics of let's have the longest train possible, and that's not working against an Alpecin who just punch up really late after being in the wheels all day?
I think it's a combination of the road that they were on allowing other teams to come over them and the having of a longer train. And it's the thing that we see DSM having issues with in previous sprints last year and also this year at certain points, where they've got their sprint train at the front with 4K to go, 4 or 5 riders at the front, and then you realize that Alpecin's moving on the right side of the road, which is an open area on this stage. The entire last 2.9 kilometers towards 400 meters to go is open on the right side of the road, and people can come back over you at that point. They can wave over you with their train, just like happened last year on the same parcours. So, yeah, they could have seen that coming, that they were not supposed to be on the left side of the road at the front already because people are going to come over you in the last 3 kilometers, and that's exactly what happened to them. And that's why towards the actual sprint happening, they were starting to get boxed in. Block. I can't talk.
Well, blocked in. New word. Blocked and boxed in. They were blocked in. So Kirkle was caught with about 3Ks to go. Great effort from him. Maybe if Pogačar hadn't punctured, he would have made it. Probably not. And it's what Benji was saying, and Pogačar said it after the stage. He said, these are not like European roads. If you're out of position here, you can make it back if your team helps you, if you're on these wide highways. On narrow European roads, sometimes if you have 5 men in front of you as a sprinter on your team and you guys could take control with 3Ks to go and there's corners and it's 4 men across, maybe no one can move up. So I think UAE sprints are indeed different to a lot of the sprints we see. I'm looking at the overhead with 3Ks to go. It's literally 10 trains across and everyone gets a chance to move up. But as Benji said, there was a huge left-hand roundabout with about 2Ks to go. Israel moved up with Impey and Dowsett before then going for Barbier. Alpecin had moved up at that point, but then they I think they waited. Philipsen said Ricard had a mechanical. What was the next corner, the next pivotal moment, Benji? Because there was kind of a lull after that huge 270-degree turn till 400.
So basically in that last 1.5 kilometers, there was still an opportunity to move up, and some teams tried to do that. Bike Exchange tried to do that after being waved over earlier already on the right side of the road, but they were too far back at that point, again with 4 riders trying to do the same thing. They still had the riders because they didn't spend it on the left because they got boxed in. So that's a bit of a sequel to the Bike Exchange discussion of a second ago. Other teams tried as well. We saw, I think, Timo Rosen moving up with Olav Kooij on the right as well, trying to position Kooij into a wheel that was competitive.
And
they seemed to succeed. Yes, and Dumoulin also moved up, trying to... well, it's kind of weird, right? Because Bora was also there, but something happened.
Yeah, Dumo was moving up the right-hand side and Mullen was with the Bora train. He kind of moved across off Alpecin and maybe he was overtired after his Twitter tirade against me last night, since deleted, where he said, I struggle to ride in a straight line at the end of stages at 200 BPM. Maybe Dumo should have known that because Mullen drifted into him. Dumo was like, what are you doing? And then Mullen gave him a big shoulder and Dumo was like, what's your problem? Waving at him. Anyway, Rosen ended up putting Kooij in a good position where Philipsen slotted onto Bennett's wheel as they were coming together through that last right-hand bend. And Kooij ended up fighting Malucelli, the Gazprom sprinter, who's been in good position all week. And he got onto Sam Bennett's wheel. Danny Van Poppel did a magic lead out once again for Sam Bennett, bringing him up off. I think Guarnieri was there, and then Damar was, I don't know where he was, but Kooij and Malucelli were fighting for Philipsen's wheel. Van Poppel today, through a gentle right-hand bend, opens up the inside for Bennett, which he didn't do the other day, and Bennett sprints through it, jumping. Ackerman went way earlier here last year, but Bennett jumps through there, closes to the barriers. Kooij has been sort of jumped early at about 200 when it straightened up, and Philipsen just came over the top of Bennett and destroyed everybody. Kooij had to check his sprint and then go back left around Bennett and Philipsen, but he never got up to Philipsen's wheel. So much more impressive from Kooij today. Well, better positioning from him. Malucelli's positioning for Gazprom's impressed me, but the speed difference between Philipsen and Bennett, Benji, I never thought Philipsen could be this fast. I thought it was like a classicsy sprinter, but maybe those Tour of Turkey sprints last year were better than we thought.
I also think he had to step up this year based
Yeah.
on last year. He's still young, he's still growing, and he's still learning from sprints as well. And it seems like he's the kind of rider that goes for every little gap that exists, even if they don't really exist, he makes them exist. And somehow he finds a way to go through. I was checking the sprint yesterday, and I saw that he was kind of riding through a rider, it looked like, but he was just riding through the gap ahead of the rider, but you couldn't see it from the helicopter angle. So it's pretty crazy how he jumps through all these tiny gaps in the sprint, and I think that allows him to be in a position that is competitive every single time, next to having a solid lead out in the likes of Ricard, who wasn't there today because of that mechanical. Well, if you combine all that, you're going to be competitive in a lot of sprints, and if you're competitive in a lot of sprint, you've got more chances to win those sprints. I want to bring it back to Kooij versus Malucelli for a second. What do you think between the comparison of those riders? Because I've got a feeling that Malucelli is kind of the rider that sprints like, I would say, the Sagan style, where he follows people the entire sprint and figures out a way to stay in a position, and as a consequence is able to be sprinting every sprint for a top 10 position, but doesn't necessarily have the speed to win a sprint. What do you think about that?
I agree. He is just trying to look for the fastest guy and get in his draft and have him sort of drag him along. And the speeds they're going here, 70 k's an hour plus, it makes a big difference. But still, 6th and 4th in a UAE Tour World Tour sprint with Groenewegen and De Maar struggling. It's really impressive, even if he doesn't really look like winning. But Philipsen takes another W ahead of Olav Kooij, the young Dutch sprinter on Jumbo. Bennett 3rd, Malucelli 4th, Barbier 5th, then Viviani, De Maar, Dainese, Canter, and Mark Bristenga, who sprinted instead of Lapinge for Trek. Anyway, they're just trying something different. Before we discuss Bora Hansgrohe and Sam Bennett, I want to mention our show partners, Zwift. The Rafa Rising event starts tomorrow on Zwift. 3 days taking on 3 big peaks, including Alpe d'Huez Zwift, Ventop, and the Watopia Epic KOM. Nearly 3,000 meters elevation over 3 days, with in-game kit unlocks, a GC, and a prize draw for Rafa vouchers if you complete all 3 stages. Head to Zwift.com to find out more and to start your free 7-day trial.
I would like to kidnap you one more time for GC now, because Pogačar extended his lead today. In the initial echelon, he sprinted in the first echelon for the intermediate sprint. Took away 2 seconds there. I think Philipsen won the sprint, and I think Vlasov got fat. So 2 seconds for Pogačar, 1 for Vlasov. Therefore, the gap between Pogačar and Yates is now 17 seconds instead of 15, and the gap between Vlasov and Yates is now 3 seconds instead of 2. So, I just wanted to give that to you.
Yeah, Pogačar said he was there and he's like, why not go for the sprint? He said he struggled to beat Philipsen. I mean, I forgive him for that, but still, he's got a mean flat sprint on him. And with every second does count. And I think he knows Yates is pretty close. And Hafit's not tomorrow, but they're still thinking about it. Maybe they'll try again if there's crosswinds possibilities tomorrow. Stage 6, Expo 2020 Dubai. Back around doing a loop and then finishing there as well. 180 kilometers, 2 intermediate sprints. Benji, don't you think they should put the last intermediate sprint later? Because what's been happening is they catch the break around the intermediate sprint with 50, 55 Ks to go, and then everyone stops pedaling. I swear they were at 42 Ks to go for 20 minutes today.
Yeah, but I think it's also a combination of the echelons with how the peloton rides, because it seems like they let the gap go out to 2-3 minutes, and then the echelon thing just drops it to 1 minute every single time at the first intermediate today, and then later in the race with 4:35 to go. Very much the same story now. I honestly don't know where the wind comes from tomorrow, so I can't tell you which sections will have echelons and if the ones with the intermediate sprints have those, but I can tell you that it looks like there's a bit of a corner going on in the last, 1 kilometer? But the thing with these maps of the UAE Tour is that the title of the finish is always above the finish. So therefore, you can't really see the corners in the last kilometer without the road book, which I don't have. And as a consequence, I can't tell you if it's going to be a technical finish or not. But who do you think is going to win the sprint? Is it another one for Philipsen, knowing he is the fastest rider? based on the sprints we've seen in these sprints, and has the best positioning skill together with Ricard as his man to bring him forward? Or do you think that someone else can take the sprint here?
Well, Cav said he had a mechanical, or it looked like he had a mechanical rather.
Yeah.
I haven't seen confirmation of it, but he didn't contest the sprint in the end. I think Cavendish, he had a big crash. Not a big, well, it was a heavy crash at speed yesterday. Don't know how that's affected him. Otherwise, I would have been bullish on Cavendish both today and tomorrow. He looks really good. I think it's going to be Philipsen again, Benji. Not very controversial. I still think Groenewegen is the fastest man here. And he's been getting boxed in badly and not moving forward. I think they need to go Mezget's more free roll with him. Just make them a pairing and have Mezget's follow Philipsen.
Yeah. Okay. Similar in the way that Merck was doing for Cavendish in this UAE Tour. Then I get it. And like, it's obvious that they're having too many riders ahead of Groenewegen because he's always so far back as a consequence. So they indeed need to change something at Bike Exchange to be able to position Groenewegen well for these sprints. Saying Philipsen is kind of boring after 2 stage wins already. I need to find someone that will come out of nowhere and snipe away a victory. But yeah, who will do that? That's a very good question.
Well, you would have said Kooij, but he's come second, so it's not even like that's almost not a surprise if he does win.
Yeah, that's true.
I think he can win.
I'll say Kooij because I like the young sprinters. How old is he these days? 20 years old. We can't forget that. That's so crazy.
Yeah, and Philipsen's young.
That's true as well, but a bit older, right? Than Kooij, 23, 24 at this point?
Philipsen is 23, turning 24 in March, and he's already got like 8 World Tour wins. He's a crazy good rider, and he hasn't really done classics yet, except for LaPresse. So anyway, I think with Ricard, Philipsen will be the man to beat. I think people will be wanting to follow his wheel. It's a difficult one to follow because he moves up late, and if you're moving up from deep and you're trying to squeeze through the gap that he's just squeezed through, that gap might not be there when you try and move through it. So he's a difficult wheel to follow. Cavendish, hopefully he's back in good form and we see a sprinter royale with Cav, Bennett, Groenewegen, Kooij, Philipsen, etc. tomorrow. But thanks as always for listening to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. We'll be back with the sprint number 4 recap tomorrow, and we'll see you on the roads of Zwift this weekend. Ciao.